For this video, we're going to need quite a bit of room. Today, I'm going to be attempting to restore something which should have been destroyed long ago. This is the incredibly rare Nintendo 3DS store display kiosk, found on the side of a road. Yeah, I'm not joking. Who knows how long this was outside for before my friend brought it inside and gave it to me to fix up. It's clearly taken a beating. After these were used to advertise the Nintendo 3DS in stores, Nintendo requested that these got sent back, where they were inevitably destroyed. So it's incredibly rare for one of these to end up in the hands of a private collector. There is rust on every single wire, which has been caused no doubt by the rain. This is not safe. Not to mention, it's disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. But not for much longer. Let's see what I can do. I interrupt this video to tell you something very important. This video has been sponsored by PCBWay. PCBWay is your one-stop solution for all of your little DIY tech needs. They offer 3D printing, CNC machining, laser cutting, injection molding, every single PCB you can possibly imagine, flexible ones, rigid ones, and so much more. It is a great resource for people wanting to build their own things at home and want to take it up a level and make them really sort of professional rather than just 3D printing something at home. They can do injection molding, which is absolutely incredible. Look at some of the stuff that people have created using PCBWay. Check out PCBWay using the link in the description below. Okay, so let's take this thing apart, starting by removing the 4 Allen key bolts on the top of the unit. This thing is absolutely unwieldy. It takes the force of 1,000 angry capybaras to move it around, so I apologize in advance for any shots missed. Now luckily, my other kiosk came with a key, which is great because the new one had the same locks. These were to secure the Nintendo 3DSs into place to avoid people stealing them. They're incredibly well engineered and luckily they seemed mostly intact. However, someone had clearly bent the corners to remove the devices from them before it was left outside. No doubt the 3DSs were destroyed in the process, so that's an emotional thing to think about. I'll have to address those bent corners later and try and find the person who did this. I'm going to go ahead and remove all of the components from these brackets so I can get on with disassembling the rest. Once the brackets were removed, it was then time to lift this top piece off. At this point, I still had no idea how this all comes apart, so I'm just winging it. Clearly something wasn't right, because for the life of me, I couldn't get this piece to come off. This meant I had to turn my attention to the other locks, but this time, I didn't have a key, so I had to pick them. To this day, I still don't know how these lockpicks work, and I think it was luck more than anything that got it to work in the end. But I'll take it. With a bit of wiggling, I managed to unlock them. Yes! With these both popped out, I could lift the top piece off. This also weighed a ton, and to make it worse, it was connected to the 2 power cables for the 3DSs themselves, so I had to hold it up and unplug those. But with that removed, it meant I could go about taking this whole top piece apart. There was conveniently a big old rusty Allen key which was for removing these bolts. Perhaps this was for the stores to use to assemble them after the kiosks had been shipped to various parts of the world. This part is really neat, but unfortunately it's rusty and the card inside has faded. We'll have to sort both of these things out. I then had to remove the power cables which go into the arms that hold the brackets. It's all integrated internally, so you can't see any of the wires. With that all removed, I had another go at taking this top piece off. This time, thankfully, with more success. This also had a card inside, but this one is even worse than the other. I look forward to showing you what I did about this later. For now, let's carry on with taking things apart. I think it's pretty clear by now how long this was outside for. It's absolutely filthy. It's also discolored slightly, but since this top tray is so thin and old, I'm worried bleaching the plastic could cause it to be too brittle, so I'll just be leaving this. Maybe in the future someone might come up with a less aggressive method for reversing that discoloration. For now though, I'll just be giving this a thorough clean. Cleaning this kiosk involved a couple of cans of Mr. Sheen, several microfiber cloths, a bunch of magic erasers which are effectively sanding sponges, and all of the might in my weak little body. The rust on this plastic definitely isn't helping it slot into the base piece very well. So removing this is not only important for the fitment, but also because rust on plastic is likely only going to continue to cause more damage in the future. So it's really important that it's all removed. To help this, I also use some incredibly fine wet and dry sandpaper for the more stubborn bits. Eventually though, it started to come up really nicely. For the card display windows, the acrylic got a spray with some Mr. Sheen and a rub down with the microfiber cloths. The bezel piece was a little bit rusty and scratched, but I opted for cleaning off as much of the rust as possible with the magic erasers and leaving it as it is. This is a really central piece, and I didn't want to have to repaint it for fear of ruining its originality. Luckily, it came up really nicely. With everything cleaned, it only highlighted how destroyed the card was. We'll have to get to this in just a few minutes, but before we do, let's clean up the other window piece. This was in a far worse state. As you can see, there's loads of rust inside. Since this is really thin metal, I'm going to have to paint this. I sanded down the rust, masked up the top, and took it outside to give it a good coat of paint. Despite the rust all being removed, I still opted for a rust treatment paint just to give it some more protection. The paint match was identical, which was a relief. We'll check back on that later. I'll now give the acrylic for the window a good clean. With both of these shining, it's time to deal with those cards. I'm going to start by scanning them into my computer and using my primitive paint.net software and limited editing skills to try and recreate these. The following scenes may be hard for Photoshop wizards to witness. For that, I can only apologize. To absolutely no one. This is mine, goddammit.
On the cusp. Not too old to adjust. Old dog, new tricks. Remember, I was just a pup. Something dirty in my cup. Clean soul.
Google was super helpful for finding images. However, there was one that I couldn't find. So I took it myself. With those done, I sent the file to a professional print shop and got them printed out onto some really high quality card. All that was left was for me to cut them all out and fit them back into the brackets. For these two warning labels, I used some tape to cover them up since they're not protected by acrylic. I also stuck them onto some thick foam tape since the originals were also raised. I cannot tell you how pleased I am with how this all turned out. This thing is going to look unreal. Now, let's address the petri dish of disease. There's definitely another global pandemic brewing on this base. With everything cleaned off, I gave it a light coat of paint. This is a very central piece and it had been discolored in the sun. I found an exact paint match and it came out perfect. As for the rusty bolts and Allen key, I left them in a drink for human consumption to remove thick rust. Right. Then it was time to give the power cord a good clean. What I want to do is put the base all back together first so I can then start assembling the top. For that we need to clean up this power cable. It's absolutely filthy since it's been on the floor of a shop and then left outside. But the magic eraser sorted most of that out. This is not an ad for magic erasers. Then I could clean the long middle section and remove all of the scuffs. Being at foot height, this thing took a real beating. But with lots of scrubbing, it came out perfect. I'm really pleased that I was able to keep nearly all of the original paint on this kiosk. It's a piece of history, and I'm honoured to be given the chance to preserve it. Having spent the night in Coca-Cola, the bolts came up great. I covered them in some oil and set about reassembling the base. Since I have hardwood floors, I added some foam feet. This would have been a good idea from the start, but since Nintendo knew these were going to be destroyed after use, I'm sure they weren't thinking about my floorboards. So, the next job is the wiring. I had to figure out what was going on with all of this, but actually, it was fairly straightforward. There's a block connector attached to the end of the power supply, which as I said earlier, might have been for the shop to connect these top pieces after transit. One of these was mostly intact, the other, however, was badly damaged. So I set about taking it apart to reattach the wires. With all new wire freshly exposed, I soldered everything together. And like the original, I added black heat shrink to protect the wires. Then I had to tackle this connector. It wasn't pretty, but I opted for soldering the wires into the pins since the alternative meant trying to pull the fragile pins out, and I just didn't want to risk that. It did melt the plastic a little, but the connection will be solid. After that, everything could be covered up, and that's one of them sorted. The other only needed one wire reattaching, and with that, they were done. The only thing left to do for the wiring was create new end connectors. These were really badly damaged and extremely rusted, so I had to make brand new ones. I bought a couple of power supplies and cut them down, stripped the wires and added nearly identical connectors to the end to make them look as close to the originals as possible. And believe it or not, with those done, I could start to clean up the brackets and reassemble them. I have this nice rare green 2DS which can now slot into the bracket. We will be able to see later if this is charging that all of my wiring was perfect, or it will set on fire. After a light beating with my mallet, I was able to reshape the bracket. Everything went back together perfectly, a few more things to go for this one, and then I can fully reassemble the top. I can't believe I'm saying this, but after plugging the power supplies in and sitting the top down, it's done. That's all from me. See you soon.